Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I do think it's kind of interesting. So Dan Hurley has certainly been in the headlines over the last couple days, okay? So we talked a lot over the last couple shows about just Dan Hurley in general. You have the game on Tuesday of last week where he, of course, is caught yelling at a ref saying, quote, "Don't big time me," and I'm maybe paraphrasing, but I'm not off by much. "Don't big time me. I'm the best effing coach in the sport." He then does an interview with Adam Finkelstein from 24/7 where he basically says, essentially he pulled the Conor McGregor, "I want to take the time to apologize to absolutely nobody," and basically said, like, look, I am who I am. I'm going to keep being who I am. We've had success. And to paraphrase again, my players love me. My fans love me, whatever. And I will say, I thought he said something interesting. He said, the only thing I'm embarrassed about is I did think it was a little insulting to the other great coaches in college basketball. He said, I don't think I'm better than Tom Izzo. I don't think I'm better than Bill Self. I don't think I'm better than Sean Miller. He's like, I'm going to be embarrassed when I see Sean Miller on Saturday because of the behavior that I've had. Well, I bring it up because on Saturday, Dan Hurley certainly heard plenty from the fans. We'll get to the game against Xavier in a minute, but producer Matt, go ahead and play the clip of Xavier fans before the game. Probably should have let you know in case you're in the car or wherever with kids. There was going to be some profanity there, but guess what? If you go to games, you hear that stuff all the time. So I just bring it up because Dan Hurley certainly heard it from the fans. And so I think there's a couple interesting elements here. First of all, in terms of the game, Xavier did beat UConn. And Xavier gets the win. Credit Sean Miller, friend of the Aaron Torres pod. Love Sean. Happy for him. That's a team that has dealt with a lot of injuries. They get the 76-72 win in this game. And really we're the better team. From the UConn side of things, because this to me is the more interesting thing, is I had a lot of people hit me up that maybe weren't watching the game. Torres, what's wrong with the Huskies? It's like, well, it's hard for me as a UConn guy to really get too fired up. Now, I think there's issues with the team. To be clear, I don't think they are nearly as – they're not even close to the same stratosphere as last year. I don't think they're as good as 2 years ago where they did struggle in January, got hot in February, and then obviously it ultimately culminated in a national championship. But at the same time, it's hard for me to get too mad. One, you're on the road in league play. Xavier is a good team. I think what's also worth noting, Alex Karaban, your star player, one, he struggled. 4 of 13 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, and he did foul out. UConn fans will tell you they got a terrible whistle. I tend to agree. It's hard to get too fired up. They were -7 in the free throw discrepancy, this after being doubled up by Baylor. So it was a little bit more even. But at the same time, they lose the game. But what stood out to me is, like, we also have to remember their best player, second best player really struggled in this game. And they're without a lottery pick in Liam McNeely. So Liam McNeely, as I said earlier with the Janai Broom segment, hurt his ankle about 3-4 weeks ago and has not been back since January 1st. Now, the good news is he's trending to be back. Dan Hurley said he's kind of doing stuff, but he would not play in this game. But it's at least possible that he could be back in the coming days. For UConn, an interesting little schedule stretch. They have DePaul at home. They do play at Marquette next Saturday night. So, you talk about a big Saturday in college hoops. Next weekend, we have Duke UNC. We have Kentucky hosting Arkansas, the John Calipari return. But we also have UConn and Marquette, the two of the better teams in the Big East, although I will say, as we talked about on Thursday's show, St. John's is awesome as well. But I want to go back to the Dan Hurley audio for a second, okay? And I want to go back to the discourse on Dan Hurley. So Dan Hurley, again, had last week, yells at the refs. It becomes a story. Heck, Stephen A. Smith was talking about it on First Take. And then he does the interview where he basically says, I apologize to absolutely nobody other than the other great coaches in the sport. Well, I was thinking about this because I saw that video. And as a matter of fact, producer Matt, in 1 second, I want you to play it again. I do want to remind people that are driving, there is some profanity, but play the video again from Xavier fans before the game. So as I watched that video, I was thinking this is that like Dan Hurley, right? He's kind of a menace to society and everybody thinks it's the war. How can he talk the way he talks and how can he act the way he acts? And listen, I said it after the game the other day. I did not love some of the behavior from Dan Hurley. I did not love the comments that he made towards the ref. But I'll also say this. You know what struck me? Xavier is a team that essentially has no real history with UConn. They've only been, this isn't UConn playing Syracuse or UConn playing St. John's or UConn playing whoever, Providence for sure. Teams, that UConn has been playing for decade upon decade upon decade. They just started playing Xavier when UConn returned to the Big East about 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. And so, like, there isn't a reason for Xavier fans to hate Dan Hurley other than that he is, if you are not a UConn fan, imminently hateable. But what I was thinking about was, I actually think this is a good thing for college basketball. All I hear is, this is terrible, he's awful, he's a jerk, he's this, he's that. And maybe that's true. But you know what else he is? He has become a villain in college basketball. And I think, transparently, that's what we need in this sport. I've been thinking it for a few weeks now. But since Coach K left, we really haven't had a villain in college basketball that everybody can rally around, everybody can hate, everybody can be sick of, everybody can think is obnoxious, everybody can whatever. Well, Dan Hurley is officially that guy because you have Xavier fans that don't like him. Every time that I post about him on social media, people go crazy. And so I just think that's a good thing for the sport of college basketball. I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't love the behavior. And listen, it did cost them a game, them being UConn, at some point earlier in the season when they played Memphis. But it isn't going to change the fact that college basketball kind of needs this. They kind of need a guy that everybody can rally around. And I'll also add this. I think Dan Hurley kind of embraces the villain role. Now, I don't think that he is purposely screaming at refs just to get attention. I think that's naturally who he is. You can argue, is it out of control? Is it not out of control? You can find videos of every coach in America yelling at refs. My buddy Mark Zanetto, who hosts the Lockdown UConn podcast, put out videos of Bill Self and Tom Izzo and Mark Pope doing the same. Mark Pope when he was at BYU. So you can find videos of everybody yelling at refs. But the thing that makes him a villain is he refuses to apologize for it. Just basically says, nope, this is who I am. Deal with it, whatever. So I bring it up because UConn loses. Listen, I don't think UConn's season really starts until they get Liam McNeely back. It is hopeful by this weekend when they do go to Marquette. But to me, this is it was a tough loss. UConn is clearly not the team that they've been. 14-6 overall, 6-3 in the Big East. But it doesn't change the fact that Dan Hurley certainly inspires a lot of anger from other fan bases, and I think that's a good thing.